liberal arts lift up. Welcome to Caribbean Thought. I was not recording. Welcome to Caribbean Thought. Today's lecture, I'm giving an introduction as to what we will do in today's lecture. And the first thing we said today is that we want to begin to delve into the answer, into the question, or for reflection, what is the Caribbean? And what I had said is that you were all provided with an assignment, which was a pre-assignment, or a getting to know response, with a response paper, and there are two very important questions that we want to delve into, which you have all, or most of you have provided responses for. What is the Caribbean and who determines this? What is the socioeconomic context of the Caribbean, which we may briefly delve into for today, but we won't delve into it too much. And there are other responses that we will not take up for today, and that you provided, we won't take up for today, but for later class. But what is the Caribbean and who determines this? And I say to you, to answer that question may require a journey in history. And for this particular course, what I have done is that I have created a timeline of Caribbean history, starting from before Columbus, leading up to the 21st century, in table format, which you will have a copy of, where you have a timeline which dates on the left column, and on the right, a brief description, which you're going to find. You'll find that to be very useful and resourceful as you grapple with what is the Caribbean. We will delve into what is the Caribbean today. Part of when we ask what is the Caribbean, of course, you will ask, one of the questions you will have to ask is, what do we mean by that? I mean, you ask of anything, what is the Caribbean? What are you talking about? And I'm saying to you, I'm a student of liberal arts, and liberal arts lifts up issues of ethics and human values. It concerns itself. Liberal arts, liberal studies concerns itself, and I believe that Caribbean thought, as part of post-colonial theory, is part of liberal arts, which lifts up issues of ethics and human value. And when you ask the question, what is the Caribbean, within this particular class or within post-colonial theory, as scholars, as academics, of course, within the milieu of liberal arts and liberal studies, of course, part of the answer, part of the perspective, or the perspectives that we will provide, would be one that is subaltern. And of course, we talked about that last week when we played the film. Subaltern looks at history from below. Homi Bhabha talks about the periphery and the center, which is a very important trope that one must concern oneself with when you begin to study and to analyze and make evaluations. The center and the periphery, that the traditional and the non-traditional. But of course, one may provide a subaltern perspective, because you guys live in the Caribbean and you guys are affected by the legacy of colonialism. So of course, when you ask the question, what is the Caribbean, the perspective that one may provide is one that is subaltern. So the understanding of Caribbean is just that you provide, and that we provide, or for our deliberations, is one that is probably subaltern. And of course, one of the things when you ask about what is Caribbean, you're looking at, as we said, Caribbean slaves coming from Africa. And CLR James talks about two things that exceptionalizes and characterizes Caribbean slaves from Africa. What are those two things that distinguishes Caribbean slaves or Africans who came to the Caribbean? Um, and of course, that's very important. One of the things that CLR James talks about the Caribbean when in terms of Caribbean history talks about the revolution that had defined Caribbean, leading to its independence in the 1930s up to the 1940s and 50s. Talk about and 60s talk about this. The spirit of the revolution was one that was West Indian, which was what connects the Caribbean. There was this deep connection that between Caribbean peoples and societies. But of course, we will. But for today's class, we are asking the question: what is Caribbean? We will answer the question, what is Caribbean? But of course, you guys provided an answer. And one of the things I made a note of some of the answers, and I think I started responding to some of you. In an in the I responded to some of you the answers you provided in terms of what is the Caribbean, and I said, and some of the answers was, I still do not understand what is the Caribbean. And some of you might hear me say, oh, you still leave me in limbo. And then you might have heard, and some of the responses I said, except apart from the geography of the Caribbean, I am still left with the answer, what is the Caribbean? As you see it, as scholars, as academic, as people from the subaltern who are affected by the Caribbean. Some of you, I mean, some of the responses I could understand. Some of the responses I seem to have come from texts and so on. Yes, fine, but as Caribbean people, I mean, and I said to somebody, I asked the question so earlier. I asked somebody, "What is the Caribbean?" And the response, to another student, not in this class, in another class at another university, and the answer, and I said and he asked me, why is it important for us to ask that question? Why is it important for us to, or what is wrong with the answers that, I said to the person, the answer that I'm getting is as if we're in a geography class, coast, Caribbean, the usual answers, Caribbean islands surrounded by Caribbean Sea. And I said to you, when I asked the question, what is Caribbean, especially within post-colonialism and within this class, I'm trying to get to a truth, because as we said, history as a result is a result of the varieties of human natures and circumstances. And we are trying to get to a truth. And epistemology is the study of knowledge, but not just any knowledge. How do you know what you know? Why do you know what you know? Okay. How do you know what you know? And why do you know what you know about life as it is in the Caribbean today? And then I asked the question, okay, fine, I understand. And I said, today, outside of anything else, what is the Caribbean today? And then I think Kemori or one of you might have made a response. And I said, look at your response for the Caribbean. And then look at your response for critical thinking. It is not by chance I am asking the student. I provided the response I gave to the student, whichever student I gave. I said, because the response to critical thinking was spot on. And then I said, and then look at the response you provided for Caribbean thought. Or for Caribbean. And then, of course, that was I'm leading the student on, in a sense. I'm having the student trying to arrive at something within him or her, himself or herself. So so the question of what is the Caribbean, and I said to the person, the reason I am asking the question, what is the Caribbean, because when people ask of anything, when we communicate and when we provide answers, the answer is what it is that you want people to know about me. What it is that you want people to know about me, about the Caribbean. We talk about the issue of identity and the problem of identity. Okay. And we talk about colonization is the stripping away of the individual. Colonization is alienating the individual outside of any value that he or her might possess. That is the lineage. That is where we are coming from as Caribbean people who were once colonized. But who are we today coming out of that history, which is which is a violent history? Who are we today? Oh, no, okay. Um, but having said that, one of the things that I would say to you is that one of the things that I would say to you, one of the things that I would say to you is that in asking the question, what is Caribbean thought or what is Caribbean within this class, it behoves us to understand post-colonialism and post-colonial theory because, as I said to you last class, I introduced the idea of post-colonialism and post-colonial theory. Um, post post-colonialism and post-colonial theory is important. And I didn't mean to stop sharing my screen. Let me go back to it quickly. Is this it? Or is this it? This is it. Share. Of course, for the lecture, we're still conceptualizing the course Caribbean thought. And probably this is the final week of conceptualizing the course. What is the Caribbean and what is the economic context? We said the Caribbean is an invention of the 20th century. What must it be in the 21st century? We said that the Caribbean is an invention because when you look at the Caribbean today, without European influence stemming from the 1400, from the European arriving in 1400, would we be what, without them, would the Caribbean look like what it looked like today? Would it be what it is today? Um, then we ask the question where, and then of course there are those who said that the Caribbean independence is putative because they're ceremonially gifted. In the 19th, okay, when Jamaica and the many Caribbean islands got independent, apart from fighting for one's independence and garnering one's independence, it was ceremonially gifted. Now, if if one's independence is granted, then does it mean or does it not mean that those to whom independence were granted are still creatures to gods, to masters who granted them their independence? What am I? When you look at the when you and I, of course, we're going to talk about the issue of resistance, where um, depending on who is advocating for freedom, will determine will determine the type, will determine the type of method. Because people would say Anglo-Saxons and Caucasians fighting for their independence. That is okay. But Black people fighting for their independence, that is a problem. Whenever people fight for their independence, they are referred to like how the Israel call Hamas. They are terrorists. But when Anglo-Saxons fight for their independence and freedom, okay, we call it a revolution or something of the sort. Um, but anyways, moving beyond that point, I'm making a very important point here about granted freedoms, or independence. The fact that independence and freedoms were granted without it being taken, does it not say something about the kind of freedom and the dynamics of human beings even today, even beyond independence? Because if anything, if we are all free, None is greater than the other. How is it that some men received freedoms from other men who are just free? Then it still speaks to their freedom, especially when we talk about celebrating freedom. I mean, say for example, the Emancipation Act. Black and brown people who receive their freedoms or their independence, it's only done through an act. It is an act granted by the gods or the former colonial masters. Those, because then the dynamics of the relationship that exists today is those who are granted freedom by those who were the grantors of the freedoms and the independence. But anyways, we're conceptualizing the course Caribbean thought. We're gonna say where is the Caribbean, and are the Caribbean people American? And I would say to you, yes, Caribbean people are Americans. The Caribbean is part of the American experience. The Caribbean is part of the New World. Okay, the part of the New World, part of the invention by the Europeans in the 1400s. The Caribbean, the islands of the Caribbean are offshoots, and of course, there are some islands that are the mainland, a part of the mainland of the Americas that are still referred to as the Caribbean, like Guyana. Okay, so but the Caribbean, I've oftentimes said, is part of the Americas. Not, yes, we know it's not part of the North America or South America, but Caribbean is part of the American experience, especially the Caribbean is when you look at the demographics of the Caribbean, it's predominantly of black and brown people from African descent. So the Caribbean as a region geographically, they are just offshoots, extensions of the mainland. And all mainland have islands or keys or extensions. If you throw an ink on a white paper, there's a main splat, but beyond it, there are offshoots with some of the offshoots are disconnected, but it's little small dots surrounding that main dot, but it's from that one dot. So you have mainland, and then you have the island, which are offshoots of that mainland. But outside of any geographic connection, but there's also the historical connection, and especially the black and brown people from in the US, in the Americas, their experience are connected to the experiences of those in the Caribbean. And of course, there are Caribbean peoples like Marcus Garvey who have gone on to to influence the resistance movement or the civil rights movement in North America and the UK. So there is and we talk about first generation American, second generation American, third generation American, and we talk about the issue of remittances and brain drain, but there's a connection. What is critical thinking and how it's important to the study of Caribbean thought? We'll talk about that later on today. I will stop there. Avril, you have a question. I saw your hand up earlier, Avril.
So it wasn't a question. I know you're speaking a lot about the subaltern perspective, and the definition you gave was bottoms up. So I just wanted clarity in the sense of you're looking at the history and the culture from a viewpoint of those who have been marginalized and oppressed. So that's what you're considering the bottom, right?
Right, history from below.
Right.
And that's an academic understanding in post-colonial theory about what subaltern is, or the subaltern perspective. People, again, who are affected by colonial history or by the very history that they're writing and talking about. And it was not to the 1960s that you find a lot of critical post-colonial scholars from the Caribbean, or many Caribbean people who went to to the US and to the UK and started studying literary studies, and they started writing about rethinking and rewriting about Caribbean identity, Caribbean history. Um, especially you heard Homi Baba, Franz Fanon, CLR James, so on and so forth. Yeah, so those people were considered part of subaltern studies. And to be honest, teaching this course, post-colonial theory, post-colonial theory was often aligned with Marxism, liberalism, socialism in a sense. But I don't. But I think it's a wrong interpretation. But for many of uh, nationalists in the 1950s and 60s, there was a strong movement against capitalism because the Western world and the Western powers had dominated um, black and brown peoples or countries or black and brown countries or countries of the global South, and many of them these countries promoted capitalism. And so of course many of these countries, um many of these global South countries, West Indian countries, global South countries, some countries in Africa were anti-globalist, or sorry, not globalist, anti-capitalist, because of the countries that were the dominant countries and what they represented. And so they appeal to some other economic system as a way out. But yes, that's what the subaltern studies would be talking about. But so today we want to delve into the whole issue of what is the Caribbean and what is the socio-economic context. And you guys will of course fully appreciate the class. Um, by the way, there's something I need to do here. By the way, so welcome to Caribbean Thought. And there are some of you who weren't at the last class. Sorry, some of you who are here for the first time. I would like to find out who you are and have you introduce yourselves. And now is a perfect opportunity for that. So is there anybody, Georgia, I know you introduced yourself earlier. You're gonna have to introduce yourself. I see Javon Henry. I don't think I have met him before. So and anybody else. So I would like you to introduce yourself, what year you are, why are you in this class, what you hope to achieve with your degree, and what you hope to achieve. Okay, yeah, and what you hope for by being in this class. So who wants to go first?
Sir, I believe I already introduced myself last week.
Javon?
Yes, sir.
Oh, you introduced yourself in the last class?
Last week, I believe.
Okay, what did you? I don't know what you said. What did you say?
Um, oh, I am studying theology, second year, and
Okay,
um, what I hope to achieve with my degree is, well, when I started JTS, I intended to gain more knowledge, and I hoped for whatever information I got help me in my spiritual walk, and also ultimately I would use it to serve my church in some capacity. Um Also for this course, what I hope to achieve, why I'm here is, well, it's a part of my program structure, but also what I want from it is it will help me to gain a better understanding about the Caribbean. I'm going to learn some things that I didn't know before. And I believe the information that I get here will help me broaden my understanding of the Caribbean and give me a greater sense of love and appreciation for the Caribbean. And may even give me a desire to probably do something or play some part in, helping the Caribbean to reach its full potential.
thank you so much. That was amazing. That's good. And anybody else? Georgia, do you want to introduce you? Are you in a group, Javon?
Yes, sir. I think we're doing Puerto Rico and Haiti. That's
Perfect.
what you're referring to. Yeah.
All right, good, good.
Yes,
Thanks.
sir.
Georgia, you're next.
So good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
My name is Georgia Blackwood. I'm so happy to be here. I'm really, really excited about this class. It seems to be fun and I'm feeling good energy from our professor. So we're hoping to have a good time learning about our Caribbean and about God in the midst. So I'm happy to be here. Thank you so very much.
So what do you hope to achieve with your degree?
Oh,
George?
so sorry, sir.
Yeah.
I'm a community-oriented person. And I'm a justice of the peace also. So I definitely going towards helping my community members with my degree.
Okay, are you in a group as yet?
Yes, sir. I'm in the St. Lucia group. As I said before, I'm in there with Melissa, so we want to get some more members.
Okay, okay, good, good. Anybody else? Anybody else did not introduce themselves to the group? All right, hold on, guys. That was good. This is very important, okay? As we think about what is Caribbean thought and who determines this, we said that when we provide an answer within this class, we have to do it within post-colonialism, or as post-colonial skeptics or critics or scholars. And post-colonialism, we said, is also known as post-colonial theory, and it constitutes a critical academic examination of the enduring cultural, political, and economic legacies of colonialism and imperialism. And notice this is very important. We talk the enduring cultural, political, and economic legacies of colonialism and imperialism. It centers on the impacts of human domination. Again, it centers on what? The impacts of human domination. Exploitation of colonized peoples and their lands. Okay, it centers on what? The impacts of human domination, the impacts. And please remember, we said earlier, what's post-colonialism? We said that it's a theory which constitutes what? The critical academic examination. Notice the word critical. Critical examination of what? The enduring cultural, political, and economic legacies of colonialism and imperialism. So we're talking about what is Caribbean in the light of the enduring cultural, political, and economic legacies of colonialism and imperialism. When we talk about reparation, we're talking about reparation or claims, okay, as a result of the damages done to our people as a result of historical abuse, historical theft, historical violence. And of course, you look at the Caribbean today. The Caribbean, we talk about, suffers from well, suffers from that level of competitiveness, and there is a high need for aid. Why is that the case today? We talk about enduring legacies. When we talk about post-colonialism, it centers on the impacts of human domination and exploitation of colonized peoples and their lands, which emerged in the 1960s. Emerging in 1960s, scholars from formerly colonized nations pioneered the field, developing a critical theoretical framework to analyze the history, culture, literature, and discourse influenced by European imperial powers. People such as Frantz Fanon in his Wretched of the Earth. Wretched of the Earth was published in I believe it was 1960s. I believe it was the 1960s. I have a copy of the book here. I can't, for some reason, it's slipping me. Frantz Fanon. And by the way, if you type in post-colonialism or post-colonial theory, one of the foreboding figures that you will find is Frantz Fanon, 1961. And that's the year he died, actually. Frantz Fanon is one of the fathers of post-colonial, or one of the most important figures in post-colonial theory or post-colonialism. And so we're saying that, so post-colonial theory emerging in the 1960s, scholars from formerly colonized nations. Again, scholars from where? From formerly colonized nations pioneered this field, developing a critical theoretical framework, and that's why we said that it's very important to do critical thinking in order to do this course, because to do Caribbean thought, we're actually applying and delving into a critical understanding. We're doing a critical academic examination. We're developing a critical theoretical framework to analyze history, culture, literature, theology, and the discourse influenced by European imperial powers. Post-colonialism, which is the historical period or state of affairs representing the aftermath of Western colonialism, is a term that can also be used to describe the simultaneous project to reclaim and rethink the history and agency of people subordinated under various forms of imperialism. That's very important. The idea of reclaiming, the idea of rethinking. I said to you, critical thinking is thinking about thinking and rethinking what was previously thought. Now, it's a problem. You are rethinking. It is thinking about thinking and rethinking about thinking and what was previously thought. That is a problem. But a problem for who? I said to you, when you study society, one of the questions you are asking, in whose interest is a society made? And you look at it's by studying the benefits. We say that society have traditions, have status quo, is ordered in a certain way. We talk about Plato's Republic. In Plato's Republic, he talks about the ideal society, which is also a society based on privilege. It is as if men cannot escape the thinking about privilege, thinking in terms of classes. So this is very important. So when we look at post-colonialism, it is again, it's about rethinking. It is critical. It's applying critical thinking to the study of Caribbean. So it's not Caribbean studies. You are now rethinking. You now rethink about what you learn about Caribbean studies, and understand your preoccupation or position in all of this. Why do you believe what you believe? What is your epistemological basis as a Caribbean person who have been influenced by a past that has been maligned, that has created the idea of the Caribbean today? So of course, we're talking about post-colonialism is used to describe the project to not just rethink. And we said, and there is an attack against thinking. There are those who want you to think, that there are those who don't want you to think. See, I said, Black people were supposed to be free and independent, but they weren't supposed to rival the wealth of their former masters. These independent countries, when Kenyatta asked me about why is it that Haiti is and some of these countries are still grappling with what they're grappling, and part of the issue is freedom. for the whoever we thought whoever whatever independence and freedoms that was meted out to former colonial peoples, they weren't supposed to rival, they weren't supposed to rise. When you look at the plantocracy, plantation economy and society, when you look at, there is always a suspicion about thinking. Some churches don't want you to study at Jamaica Theological Seminary if you're part of a particular church, because they think you're going to start thinking, you're going to start challenging some of their ideas. Is that wrong? What does that say about change and about people and about things and how things are ordered? We talk about the privileged power position and status, and this human inclination to stroke their own egos, this privilege, even within church, even within societies, people wanting to hold on to their privilege, the status quo wanting to, and whenever the status quo feel as though their privilege is being attacked, there is a backlash. But anyways, but that, we talk about what went on what's going on in the US today, where people are, where they in Florida, Governor DeSantis is banning black books, or well, I said to people, it's tantamount to banning black books, because who are the scholars who have come to develop this new kind of thinking? We said earlier that emerging in the 1960s, scholars from formerly colonized nations pioneered this field, developing a critical theoretical framework to analyze history. Okay, not only just, and then of course you have black writers and scholars, black academics like Dana Barry, Price for a Pound of Flesh, and several they put them in critical race theory. They said that these thinkers, these scholars who are now right from the subaltern, these scholars who are post-colonial theorists, these scholars, they are rewriting and rethinking, and some of them call them part of the Me Too movement, rewriting and rethinking history in a certain way, and according to the scientists and many of these individuals, it's helping people develop this guilt feeling, in classrooms. So they're banning black books or banning the truth. All of this is part of critical thinking. All of this is part of the critical thinking. Suddenly, African American, there's an attack against African American studies. Even today, AP studies is being attacked. But let's put it into perspective. Post-colonialism is a project that involves reclaiming and rethinking history and agency. When we talk about agency, what is agency? Provide agency, support, help, advocacy. So post-colonialism is used as a term to reclaim, to rethink the history and agency of people subordinated under various forms of imperialism. Because before, the kind of the history that was told about black resistance was a history that did not benefit the very black and brown man. But it was within the molds and the ideas who wanted to write a particular history. So post-colonialism signaled a possible future of overcoming colonialism. Yet new forms of domination or subordination can come in the wake of such changes, including new forms of global empire, such as globalization. We talk about globalization, we talk about the WTO, the World Trade Organization, and international bodies and so on. Transnational companies, multinational corporations. Post-colonialism should not be confused with the claim that the world we live in now is actually devoid of colonialism. That's the next thing. Post-colonialism should not be confused with the claim that the world we live in now is actually devoid of colonialism. So when we talk about colonialism, what is colonialism? It's control. We know it's a period of control starting from the transatlantic period. But we're even beyond After the abolishment of slavery and so on and so forth, colonialism continued even up to today. Various forms and under new names we call neoliberalism. Now, post-colonialism, when we talk about the purpose and basic concepts of post-colonialism functions as an epistemology, and I talked about epistemology earlier, which is a branch of philosophy about knowledge. How do you know what you know? Which stems from the ontology, which is the study of being, the study of nature, the study of what is, the study of whole. Post-colonialism functions as an epistemology. Why do you know what you know? What do you know what it is you know, and why do you know? Okay, how do you justify your knowledge about who you are and as a Caribbean person and your inheritances, your religion, your beliefs, your truths? And when we talk about truth, I was reading a book earlier, which I am going to share with you. Where is that book? Dark Ghetto. The Dark Ghetto. It's called Dark Ghetto, Dilemmas of Social Power by Kenneth B. Clark, which is a book that was an anthropological book written about Harlem, about a particular group, a particular society, a particular community in Harlem. And they gave it a fake name. But it's a powerful book that is beyond its time. When you study anthropology, anthropological studies, anthropology looks at anthropology is the study of humanity, the study of people, their culture, their norms, the meanings they give to their lives, their behaviors, so on and so forth. But when you talk about truth, because I said post-colonialism functions as an epistemology. And I say to you, and I was reading Dark Ghetto, and in the book Dark Ghetto, he says, Dark Ghetto attempts to use some of the truth, page 14, introduction to an epilogue. Truth is more complex, multifaceted, and value determined than is the usual fact. Again, truth is more complex, multifaceted, and value determined than is the usual fact. Fact is empirical. And the word empirical is part of epistemology. When the development of epistemological studies is the development of empiricism. Fact is empirical, while truth is interpretive. Fact is in itself unrelated to value. It merely is. Truth, as the understanding in the fullest sense of fact, is related to value, and for that reason, more fully human. Dark Ghetto attempts to use some of the facts of Harlem to ascertain some of the truths of human ghettos. Since truth is not easy to grasp or recognize, it remains more of a quest than an attainment. One is obliged to seek it through a continuous process of observation, speculation, refinement of hypotheses, and testing of those hypotheses which are at present testable. It is my hope that the attempt presented in this book will stimulate further research and study in quest of truth and social justice. We talk about philosophy. Well, philosophy comes from two Greek words, phileo and Sophia. Sophia is wisdom, phileo is love. But what kind of love? Not agapeo. Phileo coming from phileal, the brotherly love. Okay, a kind of love, brotherly love of wisdom. We should wear wisdom like a brother. Yes, that is what philosophy is. But philosophy and it is philosophy, they say it is search for truth. And here they talked about quest, and truth is not, and we talk about pragmatic truth, coherent theory of truth, correspondence theory of truth. And if in the US, the kind of truth we're talking about is pragmatic truth, truth that makes sense to you. We talk about Kant, that talks about history is a result of the varieties of human natures and circumstances. Last week, I read to you from African sociology towards a critical perspective that says history is neither mere action nor steep freedom nor frivolous creativity. It is the persistent attempt to do the best we can with the knowledge of the moment. If we are told that truth lies in the poor, it simply means that the falsity of society lies in its oppression, which, however much it is masked by idealism and argumentation, is revealed in the poorest of poor. What am I getting at here? I am saying to you that it is in this course concerns itself with arriving at truth, with contending for truth, because it recognizes that truth is interpretive, no matter how you have objective truth and subjective truth. And that's why it's very important for us to understand that, and the fact, and not only that, when you understand human nature and look at how human have behaved, how humane human beings have behaved throughout history towards other human beings, in order to stroke their own egos, in order to acquiesce the id. Yes, because there is no Sigmund Freud talked about the id, the super ego, and the ego. When we understand human beings and within the history of civilizations, then you will understand the idea that life is what you make it. Okay, life is what you make it, or what you allow others to make of it for you. But when you look at the history of slaves, when you look at slaves weren't supposed to be able to read and write. When you look at what happened in certain communities, and even within the Caribbean, at some point, it wasn't until the 1960s that they developed higher levels of learning. Okay, or the 40s, graduating from with a grade 9 was all that some of our parents could graduate with. That was okay, because most Jamaicans or most Caribbean people were supposed to just understand the techniques of agriculture or be able to smile in a hotel.
Sir, good night. Good evening, sir. Canada. Apologies for the noise in my background. I'm wrapping up an event. So you're saying something, and I want to chime in for a bit, because you see, in my experience now in Canada, well, when I moved to where I am currently living, I realized that there was a major difference between Canada and the United States. So while the United States, in my opinion, or this is how I would describe it. What's that? Oh, thanks. So, sir, in my opinion, how I'll describe the situation is the United States, as it relates to racism and other challenges that they're currently facing, as it relates to minority group, blacks particularly, they're very loud with it in a sense. But here in Canada, it is very subtle. You have to know that it is there and to recognize it, because it is so smooth when it happens. For example, you will walk into, you literally sit on the bus, you'll sit on the streetcar, you'll sit at the train, you'll be in a restaurant, and you'll notice that there's a difference. The white person will get served before a black person, right? And bear in mind, let me correct something. It's not just a white person, it's also the Indian, the Asian, and so forth, right? The microaggression is very much real. For example, the first time it happened to me, I was standing in Popeye in the downtown area, and there was like majority of these businesses are owned by Indians, and there were like some white person standing in front of me. I remember clearly, just two white women standing in front of me. They went up and they ordered, everything was fine. The moment I stepped forward, on another colleague, the cashier took 2 steps backward. And they were looked at each other. And she hurriedly took her order to the point that it was incorrect. I left where they put down the food as if she was serving a dog. I left it immediately. And I turned around and I said, refund my money immediately, please. She said, I gave you your food. I said, it doesn't matter. Refund my money. You're not serving a dog. You serve everyone else appropriately except for me. Return my money. And it took us at least a good 15 to 20 minutes telling her we needed back our money before she gave it back, right? And I'm going to, the flip side of it now is, I believe that there is some remnants still remain amongst the Black community of the mentality of the slavery. Here why I'm saying it. I work with a white organization. One of my colleagues is sitting beside me laughing. I work with a white organization. My team consists of a white man who is the head director. Then we have another director who is Black Jamaican. Then we have from Palestine. We have a colleague who is from Palestine, and I have another colleague who is from Kenya. And I every Tuesday and every Thursday when we're in office, a question is asked, or I am being pushed to do something hurriedly because a white person asks for it. Kenyatta, someone asked for this and they need it immediately, but I'm currently doing something. And when I said, and someone, one of our volunteers said to me once, why aren't you responsive toward your immediate director? And I said, for 2 things. The microaggression, the fact that he displays the attitude and behavior as if I am not competent of doing my job. And the most visible ones are, he takes pleasure thinking or knowing that he has a Black person reporting to him. And so what you're saying just now is, I can relate to it. But in my opinion, and I've traveled to other countries, I realized that as it really, like, in my opinion, and having been a part of this class now, I'm realizing that slavery affected different countries. And as the mark still remains, because I have a colleague right now, right now.
Yes. Well, anyway, I'm gonna have you table that because I'm gonna try to fit that, and I completely understand. So you're talking about, so there we call that de facto factors and de jure factor. De jure factors is when discrimination is systematic. De facto factors is when it's not systematic. There's no laws against segregation. There's no laws that would promote discrimination. However, it is still there in terms of the norms and the values that people have and what extends from that. So, but in terms of people's attitudes and behaviors and how society is organized, the education system, access to education, access to opportunity, not just, and of course, there are some people within the Caribbean who may think that, well, I mean, we do not have racism in the Caribbean. Blacks in America face with racism, but blacks in Jamaica, that's not the same. And of course, I thought that too. That was my opinion before I came to the US and of course, that, we don't, I mean, one of the benefits of being in the Caribbean is that we are predominantly of African descent or black and brown, and of course we promote out of many one people, and we were all connected to the similar colonial rule, and we are all, however, there is still classes in Jamaica and throughout the Caribbean, and in fact there is a level of elitism and a level of a kind of elitism within the society, within various islands of the Caribbean inherited from their colonial past, which also help to facilitate and continue the hegemony that former masters have over other societies. Of course, when you talk about the issue of nationalism, I was reading a book earlier, Theorizing Nationalism, edited by Ronald Biner, who talks about one of the problem of nationalism is that you get rid of or the problem of nationalism and colonialism. When you replace nationalism with colonialism, you get rid of one ruler for another. You know, in some countries, you get rid of one ruler for another, which is some of the problem of when you talk about nationalism and colonialism, getting rid of rulers. However, and then we talk about local leaders within the Caribbean and how many of them had negotiated, nationalist leaders, many of them had negotiated positions that would benefit them at the expense of the locals. And we talk about how easy it was for many of these former colonies and peoples to be penetrated by like the CIA or the French, especially what happened with or with Haiti, what happened with the Edward Siaga and Manley government, you know, so on and so forth, what happened in Cuba and throughout, how these part of the problem even is not just outside of these countries, but even within the Caribbean, as they struggle for independence and for prosperity, that part of the issue of elitism and the issue of race and the issue is part of the, okay, historically in the 1940s was part of the issues, but of course people may say now we don't have the issue of race, but however the Caribbean as a whole is a result of global racism. Yeah, because we talk about, when you look at the demographics, because you know there are those who would argue, like Martin Oppenheimer or even Kenneth B. Clark and many social scientists talk about internal colonies or quasi colonies or dark ghetto. When we talk about the dark ghetto of the global north, the dark ghetto of the post-industrial country, resemble the ghetto of the ghetto resemble quasi colonies of the post-colonial countries. Whatever the dark ghetto, whatever the ghetto of the post-industrial country, the black man in the ghetto, okay, his experiences, his problem, his gripe, yes, is almost identical to the gripes of the black man within the Caribbean when you look at it from a global perspective. So therefore we should not isolate one from the other, because together, because within together they can create a kind of unity of resistance that help to advocate for a more global change. And of course we talk about the global justice movement and so on. But when we talk about we're talking about Caribbean thought within post-colonialism and what post-colonialism study. That's the idea of presenting this lecture to you, talking about post-colonialism. Again, post-colonialism is purpose and basic concept. It functions as an epistemology, ethics, political science, addressing the post-colonial identities of decolonized people. It critiques how Western, say for example, Frantz Fanon said in Wretched of the Earth, in the colonized, underdeveloped man is a political creature in the most global sense of the term. And according to Jean-Paul Sartre, was it Jean-Paul Sartre or Simone de Beauvoir in The Forces of Circumstances, said once when Sartre had made some comment, he, Fanon, gave an explanation of his egocentricity. Okay, egocentricity is to be, you know what egocentric is? To be focused on self with a level of pride. So he said, and once when Sartre had made some comment, he, Fanon, gave an explanation of his egocentricity, a member of a colonized people. This is what he said, Fanon, a member of a colonized people must be constantly aware of his position, his image. He is being threatened from all sides. Impossible to forget, for an instant, the need to keep up one's defenses. So we talk about, let me see that again. You listen to this. You listen to this. Think about what? Think in Frantz Fanon, in the book Frantz Fanon, in the foreword of the book, The Wretched of the Earth. Tony Baba wrote in the foreword entitled Framing Fanon, said, the colonized, underdeveloped man is a political creature. He's in the global sense. The global, no, wherever the colonized, when we talk about the colonized man, okay, we're talking about in the 1950s, up to the 60s, okay? That's Fanon is writing here in the 1960s. Right? What's going on in the 1960s? There's the revolutionary wars in Algeria and so on and so forth for independence. And throughout the West Indies. He said, and of course, he left from one state and went to the next, and then went to the global south, to the north, and wherever he went and find out, wherever he travels, he's treated the same way. And so, colonized, underdeveloped man is a political creature in the most global sense of the term. Even Bob Marley felt that, although he was privileged, in the sense that you ask the question, who can escape? Who can escape? But anyways, according to Simone de Beauvoir, and once, and I quote, and once, when Sartre had made some comment, he, Fanon, gave an explanation of his egocentric or egocentricity. A member of a colonized people of the Caribbean must be constantly aware of his position, his image. He's been threatened from all sides, capitalism and socialism. Yes, from all sides, or he's threatened wherever from whiteness and blackness. Impossible to forget for an instant the need to keep up one's defenses. And so the book like that talks about, it was Kenneth B. Clark. I read a book about Harlem World when they were talking about, John Jackson, I believe, talk about performing blackness. In fact, I started to study, when you start to study Black resolve and how certain people in the global south behave in certain communities and in Black communities here in the US and so on, and why they behave with such resistance and sort of lack. Some people, they are willing to throw garbage out on the floor. They don't care because it's part of their resistance in a sense. Anyways, we talk about keep up one's defenses. The blackness, Black culture, the music, and so on. There are some people believe that it's part of their resistance, have been developed a kind of lifestyle of resistance. Post-colonial religion functions as an epistemology. Try to understand that anthropologically, the meaning of one's behavior, the meaning of one's attitude towards society, the meaning of Rastafarianism. When you start to study Rastafarianism in the 1930s, it came up later as a response to colonialism. They did not want, some of these Black people in the global south in Jamaica could not worship a white Jesus or appreciate a religion that was part of the justification that enslaved them. Yes, we talk about that taught them that not Black no good and Black people never have religion, and that the only religion is a religion from a particular culture that was supposed to be better than theirs. That we still hold on to today. Very important point I'm making when you start to study behavior within political colonialism. When you start look at the great revivalism in the mid 1850s, the great revivalism that's led to the revivalist movement was a movement that was geared towards resistance and towards freedom. Same thing, Obeah and voodoo was also part of protection from healing, and that also was supposed to fight off the evil colonial masters in order to draw on the Holy Spirit that comes from their ancestral ancestors. post-colonialism, we are led to believe that phobia is evil, and anything African that comes from our African heritage is evil. But then the post-colonial theory rethinks that. Is that true that phobia is evil? Where does that come from? Okay. What are the approaches to post-colonialism? Understanding the intricate political, social, economic, and cultural impacts left by colonial rule is essential to grasp post-colonialism. When you talk about, when you study, when you read Adam Smith, and I wrote the book Neoliberal Corporation, Reconsidered Neo-Capitalism and the Death of Nations, and I'm playing a notice the part I play upon word on neo-capitalism and the death of nations, because Adam Smith had written a book, Capitalism and the Wealth of Nations. But I am changing that to see no, capitalism didn't necessarily mean the wealth of nations, the wealth of certain people in certain nations, because capitalism serves the interest of some over the others. We'll get to that. We talk about the approaches, and we talk about according to Adam Smith, the wealth of nation was as a result of hard work and savings, trying on Max Weber's Protestant ethic and spirit of capitalism. It was about hard work and saving, applying scientific production that increased output. So it's about working hard, and but Karl Marx in his Das Kapital challenged Adam Smith doing critical thinking. Yes, critical thinking. He challenged it. He came on the scene and said, no, that is not true, Adam Smith. That is not why wealthy people became wealthy. That is not why we talk about the accumulation of capital. The accumulation of capital was not a result of hard work and saving. It was as a result of theft. And then, of course, you start. There's a book that I was trying to find the book that talks about the serfs and the feuds and the idea of theft. Colonialism is all about theft. And that is why there's talk about reparation. Because part of the accumulation, when you start part of the dominant class, when you look at those who are poor today and those who are wealthy, those who continue to struggle and so on, where does that come from? You cannot read Adam Smith's book, you have to also read Karl Marx. Because when you start to study human beings, human natures, and the history of violence, not just, okay, and the violence was also literary. The attack against human beings was also through knowledge. In fact, when the Bible was about to be, when the Bible was being translated into English, there was fierce resistance. There was an attack against knowledge, so attack against truth. So that when you study control, part of control is to redefine somebody. You know, Franz Fanon said colonialism involves the depersonalization of people, but you want to attack memory. People should not have memory of where they come from. People should, and by that you want to attack their ability to read and to write and so on and so forth. So there's an attack against education, or the kind of education will determine the kind of access you have in society. When you look at the Caribbean and the fact that we are not capital intensive, so the benefits that we are supposed to get from bauxite, we are not getting it because of our development was devoid deliberately to prevent us from from attaining a capacity that provides us the opportunity to compete and to be able to produce and to grow technologically. When I said to you, in the US, a friend of mine could not, when he went to college, he wanted to be able to do computer science, computer studies. He couldn't do it. He had to do some other subject because in his high school, he was not exposed to a certain math. Only certain schools with certain demographics are exposed to a certain level of education, which predisposes them to a certain level of higher learning, which predisposes them to a certain job that carries with it a certain kind of compensation. When you look at society today and where we are in terms of our level of on this our stages of development, or when you look at in terms of the types of job, the type of industry, the kind of aid that if we do get aid, the aid borders around tourism and certain things that keep us at a particular level. I said part of the problem of immigration is we will never we'll never resolve the immigration issue because of unfair competitiveness in the world, which creates lack, which creates poor countries, poor areas, poor people. You will always have that. We talk about we need a certain level of wage in the US. So the US and certain post-industrial countries rely on certain employment from the Caribbean, domestic employment, agriculture, so on and so forth. They rely on certain level of education. One of the ways of dealing with inflation is by getting a certain kind of immigrants, migrants, who are willing to get a certain level of pay, which keeps price down, which keeps inflation down. You keep inflation down because certain black and brown people and certain regular low-wage people in post-industrial countries, they are hammering and clamoring for higher wages and so on and so forth. So therefore, it's best. So what post-industrial countries is that they adjust their immigration policy towards former colonized countries of the global south, Caribbean countries, Caribbean people. When they want certain level of workers, they want certain industry to be filled and to keep down wages. And they speak out of two sides of their mouth. Politically, it served them to talk against immigrants, but in a sense, they want migrant workers to come here, and illegal immigrants in a way solve the issue, the issue of low wage workers, because they want low wage workers so that it can keep inflation down. And so the Caribbean is what provides that to the post-industrial country, or they provide oasis where those who have earned certain level of income, where they can go to these countries to be taken care of. But this is important. Understanding the so the approach, so that's what I'm saying to you stems from critical thinking within post-colonial theory. One of my professors, my dissertation advisor, Martin Oppenheimer, said, "Wow, Renaldo, I hear you're teaching Caribbean thought at Jamaica Theological Seminary. Wow. Why is Jamaica Theological Seminary? Why do they have that course? Because this course is part of post-colonial theory, which many people had once thought it was about Marxism. It's not about Marxism at all. Okay, but it is critical. It's part of critical studies, which challenges European influence and culture, which may involve challenging religious education. Because we talk about Michel Foucault and we talk about the issue of Michel Foucault, yes, that questions the issue of knowledge, is very suspicious of knowledge and how it helps to maintain a particular kind of status quo within societies and across societies. So the approach to post-colonialism is one that involves understanding the intricate political, social, economic, and cultural impacts left by colonial rule, which is essential to grasp post-colonialism. And the discourse encompasses a broad spectrum from ongoing struggles against colonial and neo-colonial practices to movements for independence and cultural autonomy. Post-colonial studies draw from anthropology, historiography, political science, philosophy, sociology, human geography to examine power dynamics and cultural narratives between colonizers and the colonized. I said to you, part of when you look at the human dynamics of society, part of looking at life is looking at the dynamics that exist today. Part of looking at the Caribbean, look at the dynamics of the global south as against the global north. The book, your textbook, Neoliberalism, looks at the dynamics that exist between the global north and the global south. Why do we have that dynamic today where the global south is always developing while the global north is developed? Why is between black and brown people and white people, why do we have that dynamic today? So that is part of what we are looking at, the dynamics, human job, because of course we can't take for granted, we cannot come to the table thinking that truth is true when you understand, well, now that we are understanding truth and understanding how human nature and the corruption of history. So of course, post-colonialism is an interdisciplinary approach which explores how post-colonialism intersects with feminism, anarchism, literature, and Christian thought. Christian thought, very important. When we talk about post-colonialism, historically, colonialism justified itself as a civilizing mission, promoting Western cultural and racial superiority over non-Western societies. When we talk about Occidentalism and Orientalism, we're talking about that. Figures like Renan, if you've ever heard of Renan, Ernest Renan propagated ideologies of imperial stewardship, claiming moral and intellectual superiority to regenerate supposedly inferior races. So it delves into some of that. Post-colonial theory argues that decolonized peoples develop identity shaped by interactions among various cultural, national, ethnic, gender, and class identities as defined by colonial society. So it examines how subaltern colonial subjects, including all of us, resisted and renegotiated cultural dominance. How we resisted and renegotiated cultural dominance, and there's a epilogue in one of the book that I'm about to release that reimagines people within critical race theory, not thinking race, but moving away from a victim approach to a hero approach. That's the epilogue of the book, which is part of post-colonial theory, because now we are looking at the resistance rather than the victimization of the slave, how they were able to preserve family. So post-colonial theory explores that. Okay, it also it examines how subaltern colonial subjects resisted and renegotiated cultural dominance, complicating the establishment of colonial societies and influencing post-colonial identities and cultural narratives. Now, there's some key figures in post-colonial theory. Frantz Fanon, Edward Said, and Ian Baruma looking at Orientalism and Occidentalism, and Occidentalism, Orientalism views, the view of the East about the West that they are ungodly, while Occidentalism, the views about the East that they are simpletons and can't think for themselves. Gayatri Spivak another important person, Homi Bhabha. They have significantly, Homi Bhabha wrote The Location of Culture, or some of these figures, they have significantly shaped post-colonial theory, influenced by people like Jean-Paul Sartre, even Kant, Immanuel Kant about history, Gramsci have also played, and his prison notebook writing about intellectualism, but they have influenced some of the nationalist stuff within post-colonial theory within Caribbean. Fanon's analysis in The Wretched of the Earth highlighted the psychological and societal impacts of colonialism, and that's what made him so unique, Fanon, in post-colonial theory. The Wretched of the Earth, he highlighted the psychological and the societal impacts of colonialism, which was never done before, advocating violent resistance. Now, of course, he advocated for violent resistance as a means of reclaiming agency and dignity, and we're going to talk about violence later on. Advocating violent resistance as a means of reclaiming agency and dignity. But there are those, okay, and I am going to talk about violence in a sense. I'm going to talk about the issue of violence. Haitian violence, American violence, Cuban violence, Hamas violence. Let's forget that. But he talked about that. Said's Orientalism, so Edward Said talked about Orientalism, critiqued how Western scholarship constructed and perpetuated stereotypes of the East. Reinforcing colonial power dynamics, and just so you know, Edward Said's idea about Orientalism, that remember, Orientalism is a critique about how Western scholarship construed. Hold on a second, guys. I'm sorry. Hold on. Sorry about that, guys. I was making a very important point. By Edward Said, very important figure. Edward Said, you'll get a copy of my presentation today. He talked about Orientalism. He critiqued how Western scholarship, and it's going to be on video. So because I usually go way beyond what I have prepared. But Edward Said, so he talked about Orientalism, and he critiqued how Western scholarship, Western literature, how they constructed and construed and perpetuated stereotypes of East. That was part of the stereotype that white Americans construed about Black people, and how the colonial master also constructed about the West Indians. Same difference, the same thing. According to Edward Said, they reinforced colonial power dynamics by their construction. When you read the books about Caribbean people or Eastern people, when you read within Western literature, it was always putting them in a light as simpletons, as monkeys, as fools, as idiots with very low IQ who can't think from themselves, who were cannibals. And that is why Homi Bhabha talks about the periphery and the center. And when she went to Oxford, she became interested, and she studied literature. She became interested not in literarians that were traditional, but those that were off center. Sorry, those that were from on the periphery, like V.S. Naipaul, because V.S. Naipaul was writing, and his characters in his books, in his novels, were these simpletons who he, in a sense, made to be heroes. People like Spivak, the actress Spivak, he introduced concepts like the subaltern. Spivak was the one, Gayatri Spivak, He introduced concepts like the subaltern. We're asking who invented the idea of the subaltern? Gayatri Spivak. He introduced concepts of the subaltern and epistemic violence, emphasizing the marginalization of non-Western ways of knowing and being. Because when you look at when the idea within Western societies was always that whenever they try to understand and interpret Black resistance, Black and brown resistance, or Caribbean resistance, it was always again one that was seen as not a revolution, but as terroristic. Language is very important enough. That's how you study societies and so on. You look at the language that is used to interpret, to define, as a way to interpret behavior. You look at the language that is usually used to determine certain behaviors. If you are Black, brown, or from a certain community, that particular behavior is always seen as terroristic. But that same behavior within the traditional view, that same behavior by certain people of a particular pedigree, never seen as terroristic. I use other language. Same thing, when you talk about how to determine, when you talk about how you describe language from the Black and brown community or the African, it is always tribal, it is always Creole. But the only language that is what they speak in the European, it is a language. And that is why we say we no longer use the word third world, because language is important. And that's what post-colonialism and critical thinking is about, rethinking what was rethinking. And I said, well, in critical thinking, we're reimagining peoples within critical race theory, moving away from a approach to a hero approach. So it begins by now rethinking how the language that we use to discern people and to talk about people, and looking at the hero and looking at the value, because before there was no value. When we think about Black and brown people within transatlantic, they had no value. They were property. They were like horses and mules. Concept. The subaltern studies, post-colonial theory, helped to revolutionize scholarship and academia. And not only that, marriage with that is, and then of course they had the power of anthropology, because now you don't even need anthropology. Or in a sense, that's where you get ethnographic studies, because within subaltern studies, the very man that is affected by the very issue can now understand the meanings that certain Black and brown people apply to certain behaviors, and certain behavior is it's a response to a history of denigration and degradation. Hybridity challenged notions of cultural purity and authenticity. Homi Bhabha's notion of hybrid, when we talk about hybrid or hybridity, it's a mixture. And she talked about this hybridity. She also talked about cosmopolitanism. She also said that the Trinidadian must be an anarchist. Okay. Challenge the notion of cultural purity and authenticity, arguing for the complexity and fluidity of cultural identities in post-colonial contexts. We'll talk more about her later on. In conclusion, what is post-colonialism? It remains a dynamic field that critically examines the lasting effects of colonialism. Again, it is a dynamic. When we talk about dynamic, that's an important word. An adjective, that's very important. What are we talking about? Dynamic. Something that is ongoing. It's a process. It is not static. It's ongoing. It keeps Okay, post-colonialism is a dynamic field that that deeply examines the lasting effects of colonialism and imperialism on global societies. It underscores the importance of decolonizing knowledge. Decolonizing knowledge. Because, we talk about colonization also involves a knowledge, a kind of knowledge. Now, when we got independence, was the knowledge decolonized? No, we still hold on to those same. Now, even you look at Jamaica in 1882 or something of the sort. They outlawed obeah. And in 1962, Jamaica got independent, and in 2020, when Jamaica had open discussions to legalize obeah, the church was upset, saying that it was evil. Because is it true that it is evil? Remember, the part of post-colonial theory is involves epistemology. How do you know what you know is true? Where does that come from? But please remember that, we have inherited a particular knowledge base that continues to privilege a particular belief about a certain culture as being better than another culture. And we are holding on to that. And I said post-colonialism involved it underscores the importance of decolonizing knowledge, because the knowledge that we have to know, look, where, as you study this course, the knowledge that you have about you, your identity, your beliefs, and so on and so forth, is it bound up in that colonization? Your position about obeah, your position about African tradition, where is that bound up in that colonization? Was that decolonized when we got independence? Post-colonialism, which is a characteristic of Caribbean thought, underscores the importance of decolonizing. To decolonize is the decolonization is a process. Colonization is also a process of unpacking. Okay? So decolonizing. It's in the importance of decolonizing knowledge. So this course underscores the importance of decolonizing knowledge and perspectives, fostering inclusive and equitable societies where diverse cultural identities can thrive. But can diverse cultural identities thrive in the Caribbean today? Having come from a violent past of colonization, with our identities being stripping away, and we being alienated from our environment. What did the care? Okay, we said we have claimed. Are we truly independent from that? We talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion. They talk about that here in the U.S., but what about the Caribbean? Diversity, equity, and inclusion. Spice was going to perform at an event somewhere in the US, and I remember my family and I were involved in a fierce debate one Thanksgiving. I think it was 2 years ago. They were mad. They said she's supposed to be Jamaican ambassador. We talk about one of the problem of culture or nationalism in this is this group will. Okay, because I said we talk about that the danger of nationalism can diverge into that same colonialism, because then we become slave to particular culture that imposes on the individual. Okay, so as much as we are, the Caribbean people, we of course, and the idea of the nation represents the idea of freedom and self-determination. We talk about it. The issue of colonization continues. Because, of course, there are some Jamaicans who believe that spies should not perform at a particular event because they promote a particular thing, a particular idea that's anti-Jamaican. And we talk about the idea of that which is Jamaican. It's out of many one people. Yet, there is still this there's still this level of control. So part of this course interrogates power dynamics and cultural narratives. Post-colonial theory contributes to ongoing discussion on justice. Say, for example, John Rawls, we're going to talk about the difference between Eastern and Western idea of justice, looking at John Rawls and Zhuangzi. We'll do that probably next week. And I wrote an article in my website, theneoliberal.com, looking at Zhuangzi. So if you can go ahead, I don't know if it's on the cover, you might have to go to the Neoliberal journals, but I wrote a lot of articles about the differentiating between Eastern and Western ideas of justice. But part of this was involved interrogating, not investigating only, but to interrogate, yes, power dynamics and cultural narratives. Post-colonial theory contributes to ongoing discussion on justice, identity, and emancipation, increasingly interconnected. Now, there is more to this particular presentation, but I'm going to stop here because it's 8:57. You guys haven't had a chance. I'm going to give you a quick. What time is it now, guys? Anybody know the time? 8:58. So it's 7:58. We only have 1 hour left in the class, right? Now, how many more minutes we have left in the class?
Yes, sir. 1 hour. Yeah.
Okay, so we have 1 hour left. Yeah, we have 1 hour left in the class, so we're going to take a break. But one more thing I want to say, in terms of rethinking post-colonialism, colonialist discourse in modern literature and the legacy of classical writers explores the origins of colonialist discourse by tracing its roots back to ancient Greece. I am part of that discussion and discourse because, okay, when I said to you, the Americas, when you study the Caribbean is part of the Americas is part of the New World, part of that Western civilization stemming as far back as to ancient Greece. All right. So that's very important to know when you start to rethink post-colonialism. One more thing is that I wanted to make the point that in the realm of post-colonial theory, the study it comprises both the literature of former colonies and the literary responses within the colonization or the colonizing nations themselves. So it examines representations of colonial subjects. Representation. Say, for example, the book that I've written, Neoliberalism, it's a representation of a colonial subject, of which I am a colonial subject. And I'm asking you to also become. So you too, at the end of this course, I'm going to ask you to write as your own representation as colonial subjects, the impact of colonialism on cultural identity, fostering a deeper understanding of the complexities of post-colonial societies. Very important. Okay. All right, we will stop here. We take a break. You come back and we'll take a break. We started early. We were 15 minutes late. So I'm going to give you a 10 minutes break. We come back at 9:10, and I guess you can utilize the opportunity to think about what I've said. I'm going to email this lecture regarding post-colonialism. I'm going to email it to Kemori and then ask Kemori to email it to you guys. I'm going to and then not only that, a copy of this lecture will be available in the Neoliberal Brown podcast channel. Now, if you haven't subscribed to my channel, you can subscribe to my channel, the Neoliberal Brown podcast by Renaldo McKenzie. Just type my name in YouTube, and then I have a channel where on it I've created a new playlist. It's called Caribbean Thought. Caribbean Thought Summer Semester. And I started with 1 or 2 things that we're going to watch in this class, or you can watch it when you have a time. But I haven't. All the lectures are going to be in that Caribbean Thoughts Summer Semester on that playlist. And there are external lectures I've done with other resources that are available on the channel, Caribbean and Pan-African Thought. You can check that and so on and so forth. But for this course, I've created a playlist just for you guys. And every time you can check it, I will periodically upload videos and the class lecture to that particular playlist. On the Okay, so you can have it available there. We'll take a break. We come back at 9:10. When we come back at 9:10, I will now begin to I will answer the question, what is critical thinking and its important to Caribbean thought. All right, you're on break.
Sir?
Oh, Avril, hold on. Sorry, I didn't see you.
Oh, yeah. I didn't hear where you said you put in the information that we should go and get it. Where did you say? Didn't hear you. Because you keep on going in and out.
Send it to Kamori and have Kamori email it to the group.
You say you're gonna email it to us, sir? That's what you said?
I'm gonna email it to Kamori. Okay, I can email it to you guys, but I'm also gonna send it to Kamori. Come in if you can put it in the WhatsApp for me.
Okay.
So I'm going to send you the document and you guys will have it, okay? But as I said to you, you also need to, I'm also going to send you, you can go on my website, on my YouTube as well, YouTube. And I'm creating a YouTube channel playlist for this class. I have already started to post videos, external resources on there. The lectures are going to be there. I've already started to edit the lectures. They should be available. As of tomorrow, they're going to start populating the video. The last 3 classes will be on there. So anytime you want any resources pertaining to this class, Caribbean Thoughts Summer Semester 2024, and that's going to be on my YouTube channel, the Neoliberal by Renaldo McKenzie. And you can subscribe, and every time I upload something, you get notified of it. But I'm gonna put it in the chat here. That's the YouTube channel. We take a break. I want to give you guys the platform. Go ahead.
Will the videos and lectures also be posted on the Moodle platform?
Yes, I will put a copy of it, but I noticed that sometimes I'm having a lot of problem with the Moodle. Sometimes I post things on the online platform. It's not porting over to Moodle, and I don't have access. Something is happening with it. So, but usually I put it on there, so they'll be available there as well, and they'll be available on the YouTube channel. All right.
Okay, thank you, sir. So that means we're coming back at 9:15. You took about 5 minutes.
Fine. We come back at 9:15. Hold any questions you have now until 9:15. We'll give you a 15 minutes break.
Okay, thank you, sir.
No problem.
I don't think.
I'm not recording. I'm not recording. We're back from the break. I've said much. But what I am talking about, earlier we talked about post-colonialism and the importance, and that in Caribbean Thought we're doing post-colonial theory. And we're talking about our textbook, Neoliberalism, Globalization, Income Inequality, Poverty and Resistance, where I begin the book by saying, with answering the question, what is the Caribbean and who is to determine this, the very same figures. And of course, I am writing about what the Caribbean is. I am determining who the Caribbean, because when we talk about one of the things about post-colonial theories, one of the things we are doing epistemology. Why do you know what you know? How do you know what you know? Okay, we're doing critical thinking. And of course, we talk about the issue of the subaltern, those affected, those marginalized people are now writing narratives about their own history, about their own situation, about their own position in a way, as a way to reclaim and to recapture. And I started by talking about, from reading the book, the Negro is not any more than the white man. And Frantz Fanon, in his book Black Skins, White Masks, is here and provides a psychoanalysis of the colonized or the systematically controlled man, because that's what colonization is. It is systematic. It's a system of control. And what he does when he says the Negro is not, full stop, any more than the white man, he is removing the dominant view within comparisons, striving for the empowered self, according to Homi Bhabha, here the familiar alignment of colonial control subjects is disturbed by a break, a pause from the usual to reveal a truly authentic self. In other words, he's trying to recapture the self. The self has been alienated. So the psychoanalysis is trying to recapture this, and of course, recapture the individual. The Negro is not, full stop. In other words, he's not trying to, he is trying to, in other words, what he's saying that the Negro is, any more than the white man is, because they are both trapped. So that's a good place to begin, to look at the issue of identity and the problem of identity, the problem of nationalism, when nationalism meets nationalism and colonization. Because we talk about being free, being self-determined, yet colonialism is about control, and nationalism, we can delve into controlling individual, promoting a group think. And earlier, I don't know if it was in this class, I talked about Spice before I did the recording, and how Spice was seen as an ambassador, and they rejected her because she was going to participate in an event, because they were imposing group will and group think. So the colonization, nationalism is good, but in some sense it's bad. But who is the Caribbean? And in our textbook, I begin by saying, when we hear of Jamaica or the Caribbean, we think of beautiful islands of paradise with sun and sea and sand, reggae music, cannabis, and Arab people like Usain Bolt, people who are living out their best dreams, desires, and lives. Very good book. That's what happened. I mean, that's what happened when you think of it, when you hear of the Caribbean. But the book analyzes this motif. It challenges that motif, given the historical and current economic and political situation in Jamaica and the Caribbean and the global South. The fact that people are leaving and people are trying to leave at any and every cost speaks to the situation in Jamaica and the Caribbean. I go on to say, in an attempt to escape the adverse realities of poverty, inequality, and injustice. So I said to you, what the idea, the picture of the Caribbean and the global South is one of escape, where people are clamoring to leave, where people are trying to escape. That is the idea, the picture that the author is giving you of the Caribbean in this book, Neoliberalism. The idea of escape. They're trying to escape the adverse reality of what? Poverty. So then, of course, there's the issue of poverty, to, inequality, the issue of inequality, and injustice. And injustice, because there are those people who are filing, who are leaving Jamaica because, according to them, the injustices within the country, they are not safe, because of their political belief, because of their religious belief, because of their sexual identities, and so on and so forth. The injustices, we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion. The injustices, the people of the global South find so people leave because poverty, high levels of inequality, and the injustice. The people of the global South find themselves in North metropolises with very little agency and minimal change to their lives. So I said, so they leave, thinking that they will find something different, something new. But I say to you, what did Homi Bhabha? Obviously, they did not read what Frantz Fanon said. He said the colonized man, the colonized, underdeveloped man, is a political creature in the most global sense of the term. So they escape. They still find the same injustice, because you know what happened? Because I say to you, he realized that the blackness that has confounded him in the global South is the same blackness that confound in the global North, because it's the black and brown position in the world. Yet the issue of injustice the issue of injustice is kind of interesting because there's some justice, there's some issues of justice there people can find protection in the US and the North, Canada and the UK that they won't find in Jamaica. While there are some issues, but when there's some access that you won't have, that you'll have in Jamaica that you won't have in the US, Canada, and the UK. What is that? Very interesting. But anyways, so um so in in fact I said in an attempt, people of the global south find themselves in north metropolises, the global north. Notice the word north metropolises. It's as if metropolis. Talk, Batman with Metropolis or whatever. Very little agency and minimal change to their lives. It's like a movie when you read the beginning of this. It's like watching it's a movie. It's as if it's a movie, but it's the truth. It's strange, but true. A paradise, yet people are escaping from paradise. In fact, except for the use of cleaning neoliberal waste, I go further to give you a picture of the Caribbean and not just the Caribbean, it's diaspora and those who have escaped or left and so on, who are trying to better their lives elsewhere, thinking that they'll find some refuge in the global north, in the post-industrial. Then of course, then they find the irony of it is that they are still black. And then, of course, except for the use of doing some dirty job, cleaning neoliberals and getting pittance, because your value is based on your economic ability to only get pittance per hour. In fact, except because that's okay. In fact, except for the use of cleaning neoliberal waste, the immigrant is usually portrayed as an alien with 3 heads and big sharp teeth, seeking to steal and destroy the profit and disrupt society. Yes, that's how aliens, especially those who are black and brown, those of a particular pedigree, those from the global south, what some people used to call third world, now emerging economies. That's how, okay, except for the use of cleaning neoliberal, because that's when we talk about immigration policies and certain policies that favors or that welcome certain people, it's the adjudication and the justification is based on the worth of cleaning neoliberal waste or some economic prospects that is less than appealing to the global north individual. The immigrant is usually portrayed as an alien with 3 heads and big sharp teeth, seeking to steal and destroy the profit and disrupt society. As such, in the book Neoliberalism, we discuss Black, Brown, and Pan-African struggles for economic prosperity, justice, and freedom, and consider efforts, abilities, or inabilities to chart their own futures since decolonization and realize real political independence and economic prosperity. Notice I said the word realize real political independence and economic prosperity. It means then that the Caribbean today is devoid of economic prosperity and real political independence because of high levels of political interference. Perhaps they are charting, perhaps they are charting their own course by the few corrupt of the status quo who are benefiting from partnerships with the neoliberal regime of the Washington Consensus, advocates of the bureaucratic phenomenon. The masses are left behind. That's an interesting picture of the Caribbean that I provide. Some of the questions that you want to ask yourself for it's not just what is Caribbean thought and who determines this. The question of what is anything is a question about life, requiring an investigation about what is true about reality. What I have just said is what I have, of course, read from our textbook, which I've written. But the idea of what we are contending for here speaks to the question of what is anything. The question when we ask what is Caribbean thought and who determines it, or what is Caribbean, it is a question, and it must be contextualized with the question of what is anything is a question about life, requiring an investigation about what is true about reality. What does this mean when exploring the question of what is Caribbean? Very important. Now, of course, one of the questions I would ask you: do you agree with Renard with my analysis about the Caribbean today in the preface of the book Neoliberalism? When you hear of the Caribbean, you think of beautiful islands of paradise. You will get that answer. You will get that question in the text in the exam. What does fun and be by the Negro is not any more than the white. Anyways, moving right to that's not important. Later on, I'm going to talk about if the fallen can perceive of anything better, what will upend violence? And I'm going to present that next week because that's a very important question. Because I said to you earlier, when you look at what differentiates the black resistance from white resistance, when black people it's called terroristic. When other people do, it's something else. Okay? And I will talk about this issue of violence. But as it relates to the question of what is the Caribbean, I begin to answer I've already answered the question in the book, but I go further by saying, what is the Caribbean? This is a question of being. So when what is the Caribbean? It is a question of being, which is, you see, that is what in the preface of neoliberalism, which is when you buy a book, when you read a book, it's always important to read the cover and read the preface and introduction. You don't start with chapter 1. You always want to read the entire preface because therein lies the pretext. Therein lies the hypothesis. Therein lies the journey and the ideas of the author and so on and so forth. So when you read the book, and what I just presented to you was from the book Neoliberalism, that providing an answer to a response to what is Caribbean and who does this. That particular question about it is a question of being, and the answer is a question of being, because the question of what is the Caribbean is a question of being, an ontological one, a metaphysical one, and an epistemological one. Let me say that again. It is ontological one. Like, what about what is? It is an epistemological one. How do you know? And it is a metaphysical one. What is real? What is ultimately real? Yes? It's a question about, so what is the Caribbean? It's a question of being, a question about the place and peoples of the Caribbean. It represents part of a new world with new people. I'm reading I wrote this and it's in the as part of a lecture, and it's available in academia.edu. But it represents part of a new world with new people, islands of paradise in the Americas, with language, history, culture, religious consciousness, politics, and economies that are inherited from its mixed past. So even now, I provided, this is very important. I said, what is the Caribbean? This is a question of being, a question about the place and people of the Caribbean. It represents part of a new world with new people, islands of paradise in the Americas with language, history, culture, religious consciousness, politics, and economies that are inherited from its mixed past. Now, when we hear of Caribbean today, we think of what? Now, here comes the answer. Beautiful islands of paradise with sun, sea, blah, 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 so on and so forth. We've said that. People living out their best dreams, desires, and lives. But neoliberalism challenges this motif, stating that the Caribbean is made up of dependent, vulnerable states whose beauty is this is very important. Because in the book, I never had that. In the book, in the textbook doesn't have this part. Neoliberalism, the textbook Neoliberalism, challenges the motif that Caribbean people are living on island paradises, living out their best dreams, desires, and life. The book challenges that. Neoliberalism challenges the prevailing idea, stating that the Caribbean is made up of 1. Dependent, vulnerable states. 2. Whose beauty is divorced from its people. 3. And enjoyed mainly by those outside of it. Now, that's something we can have a debate about. I mean, we can have a debate, but there is no denying it. But that's my anthropological experience, and I'm here providing an ethnography of my understanding and research. This is important. Again, I'm going to make this point again. Neoliberalism challenges the motif, stating that the Caribbean is far from paradise, with people living out their best dreams. If anything, is made up of dependent, vulnerable states whose beauty, so there is beauty, but it is divorced in many ways from the people who live there, enjoyed mainly, or it seemed to every day set up to be enjoyed by those outside we call tourists. Further, the Caribbean represents a people who have been disrupted, 1, detached, displaced, hybridized, and made into dependent capitalist states with some amount or level of modernity to promote consumption within the neoliberal globalized world, which is largely a consumer society. Later on, we're going to talk about the dialectic of whether we live to consume or consume to live. Okay. Of course, the Caribbean was never supposed to be a consumer society, but eventually we are gaining some amount of consumption so that we can be plugged into the globalized world and continue to prop up the profits of the neoliberal regime. Because there have to be some amount of ability to contribute toward the consumption in society so that capitalists can continue to make the money from the consumer society. Very important. So again, the Caribbean is made up of dependent, vulnerable states, many of you pointed to, whose beauty is divorced from its people and enjoyed mainly by those outside of it. Further, who can spend, and when they come, they act like kings and queens, and people look to them for the almighty dollar. You know, when you go to some countries, they couldn't care less if you come from where you come from. In some countries, they couldn't care less where you come from. Of course, but you can spend the money, but they couldn't care less where you come from. In the Caribbean, we care where you come from and we want you to spend the money. You know, when you come from the global south into the global north, it's as if it's God coming is bigger. There's this air of superiority, sophistication, the way how people look at you, the way how people treat you, the way how people regard you. And the feeling that one have too when you go there, and you know, I think people are trapped too, because the tourists from the US or from when you go there, it's as if, you know, the feeling, or if you're from the Caribbean and you go back to your country, you know, there is a certain expectation, and you are trapped in that. As if the world has facilitated and necessitated that kind of dynamic between those who come from the global north visiting the global south, or whatever the case might be, and the kind and the level and this self-worth and achievement that one seem to have when they're able to reside overseas, which you don't necessarily have for some people, because there are those who have a sense of pride, but still there is this level, there is this regard that people of the global south have for people when they come, you know, and we will talk more about that. Caribbean represents a people who have been disrupted, detached, displaced, hybridized, and made into dependent capitalist states. That's a very important term to know. Dependent capitalism. What is that? Dependent capitalism. You know what capitalism is, so add the dependent part. Okay? So yeah, we are capitalist states, but we are dependent on foreign aid, with some level of modernity to promote consumption. Needless to say, the Caribbean remains vulnerable and open to penetration. That's another problem. Vulnerable and open to penetration. from without. From without means from outside. And exogenous shocks from within. Excuse me. And including natural disasters, and it's recreated within them. And it's, listen to this part, recreated within the mold and frame of its former masters. Oh, whoa! You see where I am taking this? What is Caribbean and who determines this? You see where I'm taking it? Needless to say, I don't even have to say this part. That's what I mean by needless to say. The Caribbean remains vulnerable, shaky, and open to penetration from without and exogenous shocks from within, and is recreated. Recreated, we said that earlier, it's an invention. It's recreated within the mold and frame of its former masters. Wow, I thought we got independence and we are nation states charting our own path. But we still speak the Queen's English, and nothing is wrong with speaking the Queen's English, but we look down on our own language as Creole, and if your subject verb agreement don't match up, or there is a big issue. Part of my resistance sometimes is to deliberately speak in Ebonics, although I grew up speaking standard English always. My resistance sometimes involves breaking up my language, not allowing subject to line up with object or verb, subject and verb to line up. Because that's not what's important within our culture and how we speak and so on. That's inherited. Anyway, let me continue saying this. But I said to you, we've been recreated in the more. That is the problem for Haiti. And for many Caribbean islands, when they were arranging their independence, their independence is easily granted if it is an independence on the former colonial master terms. We get their form of economics, their form of language, their form of education, their form of religion, still keep the Queen as head of state or whatever the case might be. Still promote British culture and Britishness. The more British you are seen as high class in the Caribbean, looking down on your own African tradition and heritage, to the point where we used to think that Rastas were dirty, revivalists were fringe, and Obia was evil. These former masters are now landlords. I listen to what I said. I went on to say that we are created in their since decolonization and independence. These former masters are now landlords within the newly created globalized world, where freed men now pay rent. Oh, free men now pay rent. We now pay rent. Free men. This is the new condition of the Caribbean and the world. Talk about what the Caribbean is. This is the new Caribbean. This is powerful. This is the new Caribbean and the world since decolonization, and the drive for a post-colonial world where the Caribbean had a dream of nations of freed men who were sovereign of their own lives. They met a neoliberal globalized world in the 1970s and beyond, where nationalists succumbed to denationalization of the nation so as to free up globalization. We call it neoliberal globalization because in the 1970s, the OPEC oil crisis created a dire financial crunch among Caribbean global South countries, where they did not see beyond the 1960s when they got their independence. Okay, so as a result, whatever strategy that they did not have did not take effect. Because if they had understood what was going to happen in the 1970s and 80s, they would have probably embraced the Caribbean Federation and have a federation instead of going independence alone, because everybody wanted to stroke their own egos and be the leader of their own Caribbean island. That's the irony. Because if these nationalists had realized what was going to happen, what the spending spree of the 70s would not have would have created opportunities for us. But in the 1970s, the financial crunch as a result of the oil crisis, where oil production was slashed, and because of that, it raised up the prices. What happened? That crisis created an opportunity for debt, because now the Caribbean, the poor countries, now, okay, not the poor countries, the global South countries never had any money. And now they had to, they created the IMF and the World Bank to lend the money and apply conditions for it. There goes the strategy of forever keeping the Caribbean islands down through debt as a result of a crisis. And that is why I say to you, as Caribbean people, our government must think strategically. And that is why it is important for us to study Caribbean thought and to do post-colonial theory and critical thinking, so that we can understand history and we don't make the same mistake of the past. We don't make the same mistake of our leaders who were weak-kneed and lacked vision, according to somebody in the film Life and Death by Stephanie Black. We have 4 minutes and I'm going to wrap up. I'm going to end at 10 o'clock because I've given you a lot of food for thought. Let me continue. So the former masters, now landlords. Sorry, these former masters, blah, blah, blah. Where am I? This is the new condition of the Caribbean and the world since decolonization and the drive for a post-colonial world, where the Caribbean had a dream of nations, of freed men who were sovereign of their own lives, met a neoliberal globalized world in the 1970s and beyond, where what happened? Nationalists succumbed to denationalization of the nation so as to free up globalization. We're going to talk some more about that. Because when I give you a picture of the Caribbean, we're going to refer to that again. This was a type of globalization, neoliberal globalization, that ultimately continued a strategy of Pharisaicism, now defined in the 20th century as the bureaucratic phenomenon, where established rules made through arrangements only governed the new nations, like the IMF and the World Bank and the WTO, only covered freed nations, only governed the new nations and freed people. But the old masters and their new elitist friends of the Washington Consensus were largely above those rules. As for them, the law is not a shackle, only those who are within a particular dynamic of life and society. So we're going to, in this class, we're going to see where, okay, part of this international regime, part of this globalization that's taken place, mean that you have to pull down borders, and they created rules and laws that everybody agreed to. But guess what? The post-industrial man, the global North countries, they didn't stick to those rules. We weren't supposed to subsidize our economies and our farmers and so on and so forth. But guess what? They created rules that we abide by, but they weren't abiding by because they were able to subsidize. That's part of the disparity. We're going to talk more about that because I'm generally answering the question of what is the Caribbean and who determines this. This was a type of globalization, Pharisaicism. Do as I say, but not as I do. We talk about the dynamics. The Jews, the Pharisees were that kind of Jews. They have you study history. That history has come to define our history today because that's part of Western civilization. That very same idea, that very same practice of Pharisaicism has come to inform the knowledge of our business, the knowledge of how we operate. This Pharisaical, this hypocrisy, this duplicity. Do as I say, but not as I do. That's the strategy that came to inform the world in our economic trappings and so on and so forth. That continue to extend control. The Jews were teaching people one thing but doing something else. Maintaining their privilege. P.J. Patterson said the law is not a shackle. For who? For those whose interest society serve. This was the type of globalization, neoliberal globalization. We're going to talk about globalization that ultimately that helped to that completely wiped away any progress of the Caribbean. that ultimately continued the strategy of Pharisaicism, now defined in the 20th century as the bureaucratic phenomenon. Where what is the bureaucratic phenomenon? Established rules made through arrangements. Established rules made through arrangements only governed the new nations and freed people. But the old masters and their new elitist friends of the Washington Consensus, of the Wall Street type, are were largely above those rules. As for them, the law is not a shackle, only those who are within a particular dynamic of life. The question, and we wrap up here, the question of what is anything is a question about life requiring an investigation, about what is true about reality. Life is about people and what people make it and make of it. So when we speak of life, we are talking about the experience of what is, or the reality of the experience of those who give meaning to the existence. And who are those who give meaning to the existence? Those to whom are able to set up or is behind or benefit greatly from a system that has historically benefited them and their inheritances and legacies. We are talking about the experience of what is, or the reality of the experience of those who give meaning to the existence of life through the lived experiences of people in spaces and places. The essence of life comes from the relationships between and among people, so that we have determined that life is not just what people make it, but that life is about people and how they relate within that man-made space. That's important, that man-made space. And that's why Mutabaruka says God is a creation of man. He's not necessarily saying that there is no God, but the way we think of God comes from man, and we like to promote our egos over anything else. And so human nature is bound up in our understanding of God. However, Fanon, the Marxist psychiatrist, anarchist from the colony of Algeria, now independent of France, argued in The Wretched of the Earth, in his psychoanalysis of the black and brown colonized man, that their depersonalization was done in order that they could be subdued within the dynamic of life. Subdued. What is life then in reality of truth? If man comes into the world with a thinking and identity for him or her, as if the world was created from without the external, or from without the man, for them to occupy their stations without objection. Let me say that again. What is life then in reality of truth? This is important. If man comes into the world with a thinking and identity for him or her, as if the world was created from without, for them to occupy their stations without objection. That's the idea. We pseudo appeal to an authority so as to continue to subdue him or her. But the world is created to serve interests. Whose interests? Man or God? But God may be the invocation man has used to justify a space in the dynamic of life, which had given rise to and maintained monarchies, nobilities, popes, wealthy rulers, posing as capitalists and Marxists, institutions, empires, and people's privileges and positions in life. Therefore, the question of what is the Caribbean must also follow who is asking and or who determines this, the subject or the object. This is because the truth of anything is objectified within the subjective, usually the dominant view that defines purpose and reality of the thing being objectified. So if the colonized is depersonalized, then he is always in the objective. What is the Caribbean? It is a question from thinking about one's identity concerning a truth about some reality. However, can we know anything given the problem of arriving at truth and knowledge? Descartes, the father of phenomenology, asserts that we cannot truly know anything outside of our own minds for sure. When he arrived at cogito ergo sum, I think, therefore I am. Because when one denies his own reality in order that one may begin to come to the truth of reality, he or she can't help but acknowledge the presence of one's mind that is thinking. So this argument, though limited, as it does not provide any deeper understanding of the totality of reality, is important to this study. It speaks to the realization of the person in coming to his own reality and understanding of self, the power of the individual's mind and thinking to shape and realize your own reality and truth. Yet Fanon writes that the colonized man is depersonalized and a political creature whose idea of self is estranged from him or her. So the question of what is the Caribbean must connect to a past, a present, and a future, and must consider where and when does the Caribbean history, when does the Caribbean history of the Caribbean and its people, when does it begin? The Taino people, the Europeans, the Africans? The dynamic we currently occupy comes from a history of struggle that has left the Caribbean with a new identity that is in tension. So the damage done to the colonized man and its effects on him and his continued subjugation leaves a legacy of dismemberment, ambivalence in his human being, ambivalence in human being, in his humanness, which estranged him from his individuality. That is what Fanon is pointing to. That is what Jean-Paul Sartre is lifting up in his existentialism. But those who had given meaning to what we have as a society today, or what we imagine it to be, thought it a beautiful and the most appropriate thing to order society within such an inhumane and Manichaean way, viewing men as machines. Plato, in his Republic, had envisioned a life ordered as a hierarchy, everything in their proper place, while functionalist sociologists had extended that to theorize a perfect society based on the value judgment and priorities of certain men, prioritize systems over disorder, which is the drive of those who act outside of society's rules and confinements that restrict personhood and individuality. So the Caribbean, as part of the totality of life, must critically reflect on its position in relation to life and society, because life is about people and how people relate within that dynamic. And it is people that make life what it is. The relationship within life is facilitated by communication and the progression of life, which is dynamic and seems to always be in tension between groups of peoples created by the idea of race and the class to sustain this violent dynamic. I am going to stop right here. It's 10:08. This particular narrative is also part of the new book that I've written, which was supposed to be out for you guys to read, but it's not available yet. Hopefully by the 14th, it will be released. But this is very important to the conversation about what is Caribbean and what post-colonialism seeks to do, and by extension Pan-Africanism, because we're gonna delve into Pan-Africanism. What is Pan-Africanism? Okay, we're gonna delve into what is and the goals, and you cannot understand the Pan-African ideals without understand what it seeks to do, its goals. And then I will ask, have we achieved the Pan-African goals and ideals of yesteryears? No, we have not. So that Pan-African dream and that civil rights continues today. What is your role? What is your duty? First, we must construct a Caribbean, an identity that is truly ours, based on our critical examination, which you are still yet to do based on the responses you provided me. That is Caribbean Thought for today, guys. We will meet next week, Monday. When we come back on Monday, we will I will begin by talking about what is critical thinking, and then we'll move on from there. Anybody if you have any questions pertaining to my presentation today, please send me an email or raise it at the beginning of the next class. And I am going to be looking over your responses and responding to them individually. And if I say something, you may probably respond, ask me a question via that way. Okay. But
Yeah.
anybody? Somebody have anything to say?
I'll send you an email, sir, since you say send an email.
But wait, what is anything what you wanted to say? Since let's take one or two of you.
All right. As you said, ask if there's anything about the class that we want to say.
Yeah.
A lot of information, but I don't know if you could maybe get us more involved next time around so that we can, participate and learn. And not that I'm not learning, but I don't know if you could try that. The next
Well, I
time.
mean, some of the classes that is why I asked you to do the homework, because part of doing the individual reflections was part of start thinking about what is Caribbean thought. Now, based on
Right.
the responses you provide, I come back to class and I give you an intellectual response to show us for you guys to consider, which I also said this is available. Part of this class, I said to you, you have to do your reading. You have to do your reading.
Okay.
And that's very important so that you can follow.
Okay.
Some of the information is repetitive. So
Okay.
so in this class, I answered one of the questions that you had provided, and I said to you,
I realize.
some of you guys brought answered the question from a geographical perspective without
Yes, sir.
providing a real understanding of what is Caribbean based on
To include myself, sir, right? To include myself.
No, well, I'm not going to single out anyone, but because we're all learning. So and then I normally give I will give you I will have long lectures like this. So, this is my style. I'm going to ask you to read and so on. I will come and provide you with long readings, long lectures. And then, of course, there are some lectures that I'm going to put you in group to have a conversation. You might go home and read it and come and I talk about what was done and share the perspective. So what I did today was to define post-colonialism, what it is. You will get a copy of that. And to let you know that whatever question we are asking and we are contending for, it is within that post-colonial context. And so we define post-colonialism, what we are trying to do, what post-colonialism is. Then I proceeded to answer what I asked you to answer. What is Caribbean thought and who determines this? Okay.
Right.
And by sharing some a definition from your textbook, Neoliberalism, from the preface of the book, which is available for free if you go to Amazon and go to look inside. The whole preface is there. You don't even have to get that anywhere. But I've shared, so that looks at the Caribbean. And then, of course, I also provided some other reflections, which is also available in academia.edu, which is a paper I presented in academia.edu, which is part of the reflection about what is Caribbean thought. Next week, we're gonna look at what is critical thinking, because you have also already answered that question. But I'm gonna go deeper by talking about what critical thinking is. And of course, I'm gonna ask you, this is gonna be available in video for you guys to watch. And so you guys can also watch the video. Hopefully all the videos will be up that we did last week and this week by sometime this week. All right.
Okay, sir. Thank you
keep
so
reading.
much.
Now, if you have a chance, read The Wretched of the Earth by Frantz Fanon.
The what, sir?
Wretched of the Earth. If you can, read the book Wretched of the Earth by Frantz Fanon. I don't think you guys can see the book because of my background. But The Wretched of the Earth by Frantz Fanon. I noticed that anyways, Wretched of the Earth by Frantz Fanon. Let me type it. Wretched.
Yeah, I would appreciate it, sir. Thank you.
So read Wretched of the Earth. That's one of your book, Wretched chapter and the foreword. I want you to read the foreword. Framing Fanon by Homi A. Baba. And also neoliberalism, globalization, income. We're also going to be using Homi Baba location. I'm also going to be reading Homi Baba's location of culture. And there's one, okay, so, but that is for now. There are other books that we're going to utilize. Dark Ghetto by Kenneth B. Clark, Nationalism by Eli Kaduri, and Ramnaresh Shawan, The Challenge of Structural Adjustment in the Commonwealth Caribbean. All these books are in the syllabus, but the main books are those ones, the Neoliberalism, Frantz Fanon, Location of Culture, and there's two more that I will share with you next week. All right, but for now we are looking at we're still conceptualizing the course, and we look at next week when we come on Monday, we will look at what is critical thinking, and after we look at what critical thinking is, we will talk about the wealth of nations. Okay? All right, that's about it, guys. So that's my style. So my style is lecture. Sometime I will have 1 hour of lecture, and then of course I will ask you to reflect on the lecture. All right? Yes, Nivea.
Yes, thank you so much. So, please bear with me. I'm having a little difficulty with following you, but with the information that you have given us today, what you have posted in the chat, I will have to really go through it and then um, come back to you with some. Well, you told us that we can email you. So
Yeah, email me. And what I want you to do is also this class will be available before Sunday, so you get a chance to re-watch the video, make notes, ask questions, look back at the answers I gave you that you wrote. You submitted up. I asked you a question: what is Caribbean thought, and who determines this? What is the socio-political context of the Caribbean? What is critical thinking and its importance to Caribbean? And today, I spent about 2 hours talking about those very same questions. So some of the lectures would be lectures where I will present 1 hour lectures, provide 1 hour deliveries. I will do that. I will talk for an hour talking about the subject matter. You will have to follow me on that. So that's my style. My style is a lecture, but I'm going to ask you questions before I lecture the particular thing and get you warmed up to it.
yes,
So
I am just I'll be honest, sir, I'm having a little challenge in following
yeah,
because I am used to I have to like kind of retrain my brain. So I'm
yes,
used to just following the course outline. So I'm trying to make sense of it in my head. So
yeah.
Plato and Socrates, we need to use this in determining what Caribbean thought is, right?
Say it again.
I saw something on the course outline that says that for Caribbean thought, ideology, and philosophy, we need to take it from the perspective of the foundations of the knowledge or the work done by Plato and Socrates.
No, no, I didn't say that. You're supposed to do that.
Because
Where
it's on the outline for week 1.
for week, it says I said where the outline is not set in stone.
Okay.
Okay, and the out that's just the course outline. You come to class and you do your readings and you follow it's a post-colonial theory. This is a new course. It's never been taught at J. This is not something that JTS introduces. JTS don't usually introduce this kind of subject matter to the course, so this is relatively new. One. The second thing is part of a lot of what you will get is not just by reading, but by coming to the course, by coming to the class, and of course listening to the lectures and participate. And if you have questions, of course, email your professor. Of course, you can ask questions pertaining to the lecture. But if I'm, say, for example, I'm talking about a particular thing, if you have questions, then of course you can ask the question at the end or at the beginning. So we don't have time for that today. But what I will do is that next week, if you have questions pertaining to what I have said today, then you can ask it. But please remember what we are doing in this class. We ask a question: what is Caribbean, and who determines this? And
Yes.
that's what and you have been given an assignment to reflect on this. Part of doing that assignment to reflect, it means you're going to reflect on what I'm going to be talking about so that you can follow your professor. Okay. Now you did that already, and you know what you have said, what Caribbean thought is. So now you come back to class, and then you you listen to the lecture, and you say, "Oh, that's interesting. I never thought about it that way before." Okay, then you go back to class, to a home or whatever. Look at what you had presented. Maybe I should have adjusted. And I said that earlier. Let me, I said, sir, after class, I think I want to change my answer. Or that is collegiate level. I am not, and I'm off. And by the way, it's not the first. And just so you know, this is the first or second week in the class. As I said to you, we're unpacked and unpacking. At some point, we're going to look at Caribbean history, and we are going to, because I expect you to be taking notes, but you don't even have to take notes. When I talk about take notes, we're talking about not verbatim, based on what the professor is saying and what he has asked and some of the theories he has introduced. And I sometimes say, this is important. That's when you make the note. This is important. Make note of it. Make note of some of these things. Or I might be saying it too fast. Say, could you say that again? But it is very important to make notes. And then the beauty about this class is that the videos will be posted and you guys can watch the video and then take from that. So do not, so please remember, when you come to certain classes, you cannot bring a particular expectation of a particular style. My style is 3-hour lectures. I lecture a class. I will come to the class, and let's say I'm talking about epistemology or apologetics. Apologetics is the use of logic to defend the faith. Okay, so I am going to talk. I might give you something outside of class to read, and then we will talk about it. Some class will be discussion. They might split you up in groups. Some class I may ask you to present or you take the class. This class, having asked you guys to do whatever you need to do, I am now presenting on what Caribbean thought is in relation to what we are contending for in this class. And it's for you guys to make notes and follow and make anything that you don't understand, you want further clarity on, then make a note of it, send me an email, or you can ask the question if there's time for that. Probably not
Right.
today, but next week. Okay, but this will be the style. All right.
Yes. Understood, sir. Just a quick question.
Yes.
Weekly quizzes, are they based only on the 7 questions you posted, or will you be posting more questions for the weekly quizzes?
Don't do anything more than what I've asked you to. If you haven't got an email asking me to do anything, it means you don't have to do anything. Now, I just want you to read and get into the course. That's it.
Okay.
Those questions was for you to read. Those are very important initial questions for you to start familiarizing yourself with.
Right.
And of course, start reading widely, whatever material you can start reading. The syllabus also have links to materials that you can utilize for your own edification and so on,
Okay, so I get you. So thank you so much.
Yeah, man. Now, and of course, if you guys need to talk with me outside of class, you are free to do so. If you don't understand a particular concept, please send me an email and say, sir, you said something, so on and so forth. But as I said to you, when you go to a class, it's also important to understand the facilitator's style. When you read a book, you want to understand who is writing the book. What is his ideological bent? What has he done? Where has he lived? When you read the scriptures and you practice exegesis, exegesis. You don't come to the scripture or the text, the pre-contained text with any assumptions. You have to read the pretext and the foregoing text. You have to read the biblical, the book that it is contained. Who is the author? What is he about? What is consistent about what he's saying, so that now you can get the gist of what he's saying, and you can be true to the text as you deliver it to your congregants. Yes, this is how we study, and this is how we engage the subject matter in this course as well. All right, but as I said to you, it's heavy duty. I always get this, but because I repeat myself and repeat myself, because some of these things are repetitive. And then I'm going to show you a table with in a chronological order and so on and so on. And then you have a homework. Or over time, you are going to say, wow, I understand your style. I understand the course. I've been teaching this course. I've taught this course, and what you have said is not the first time. Trust me. And I said the same thing over, but I said to people, I'm not even worried. You are going to get it. Okay, it's heavy duty, but you're going to get the idea of the course. The syllabus don't follow the syllabus too much. Just follow what the professor here is saying, because I'm trying to make the work light for you guys too. Okay. Right. And I'm trying to have you delve into the course before I give you too much. So just do whatever I have given you to do, the 5 questions, and of course the group work. Just focus on that for now, and then watch the videos and do your external reading. That's all I'm asking from the class now.
Okay, so thank you. Get you. Okay,
yeah,
so
man.
Thank you.
Take care and thanks. And thank you for the question. I appreciate it. It's all about getting understanding each other. Okay.
Okay, sir. Have a good night and enjoy your birthday when it comes Friday.
Thank you, Dion. God bless you and take care.
You too. Okay.
Bye, everybody.
Okay, sir. Thank you in advance as well.
Yeah, man.
Good.